Hello there, I'm DJ Short, and I'm joined here by Matthew Poliot, Drew Silva, Brian Boyer, and we're here to wrap up the 2019 MLB season. We're going to talk about some players we missed on in fantasy leagues this year. There's always a ton of surprises, especially this year, and with some young players as well.
One I missed on was Yordan Alvarez. We were all kind of waiting for Kyle Tucker to come up and maybe seize a job in place of Josh Reddick or Yuli Gurriel, but it was Alvarez who really seized the day and got off this fabulous start in AAA, and we were thinking, he's going to come up, he'll be good, but he can't possibly duplicate those AAA numbers, and then it was like an exact match. It was just as awesome in majors as he was in AAA, and now he's a top 20 player for next year, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think another rookie we saw come up and surprise, Pete Alonso, obviously, hitting 53 home runs to lead the majors, the first ever rookie to lead the majors in home runs. And, Fernando Tatis Jr., another one who surprised, and I think Tatis could be a top 25 pick next year.
Yeah, I mean, when he was really at his hottest, we had a lot of questions during our podcast or on Twitter. Should he be a first-round pick next year? And, the injuries made him fall. They'll make him fall in drafts next year, but you look at what he did over a short period of time, and I mean, he has that maybe 30 home run, 40 stolen base upside. I mean, if you stretch out his numbers, that's what they look like.
Right. I think there's still work to be done with the plate discipline with him, and he also had a batting average on balls in play, which is probably going to regress next year.
You count the power, you count the steals, the batting average. I'm not so sure you want to count on that just yet.
Yeah.
Right.
The injuries have piled up with him, though, so he's got to be dinged for that.
They're kind of
sure.
freak things, but yeah, you're worried. That's the only thing that's going to prevent him from becoming a star.
He missed a lot of time in the minors in 2018 as well, with injuries. So,
but if he stays healthy, he's a first-round kind of talent for future seasons.
Yeah.
So moving on to a veteran here, DJ Lemahieu. This is someone, I don't think anybody expected this from him. Actually, when he signed with the Yankees, he was supposed to be a utility player. And then leaving Colorado, you were kind of like, that's as good as it's going to get for him. 15 home runs was his career high, but he finished the season as the number 23 ranked player in Yahoo leagues. Meanwhile, he had an ADP of 222.8 in Yahoo, so that was after the likes of Kike Hernandez, Marwin Gonzalez. So really just an amazing season to do what he did. 26 home runs, 102 RBIs, and you look at all the injuries that the Yankees had, I think Lemahieu was their best player all year.
He didn't start opening day.
Right.
So, I mean, how could you project him to be 600 at-bats, even if you thought he was going to be good? Thought some of that core was going to carry over. Obviously, another friendly ballpark for him, but you couldn't project him for that much playing time, even if you thought he was going to be that good.
Right. Yep. Guys? Marcus Semien?
Yeah, Marcus Semien. So Marcus Semien, a guy who, coming into the season, more kind of a roster filler type guy, probably a guy you'd prefer to have as your middle infielder as opposed to your starting shortstop, but really exploded this year. Finishes the number 4 fantasy shortstop ahead of Francisco Lindor, among others. Career high 33 home runs, which is more than double what he had the year before. 123 runs. Mookie Betts, Rafael Devers, Ronald Acuna, only 3 guys who had more runs scored than him. I think the most impressive part of his improvement was his plate discipline, though. A couple years ago, he was a guy who struck out kind of in the 22% range. It was better last year. This year it was all the way down to 13.7%, while his walks are all the way up at 11.6%. So even if the home runs come down a little bit next year, still hitting at the top of that A's lineup in his walk year, going to score a ton of runs. So I think he can fall in the power department and still be a really useful player.
Played all 162 games too, right? Which Correa and Lindor did not. Fernando Tatis Jr., a lot of shortstops getting injured.
And the thing about Semien, you were talking about the plate discipline, chased fewer pitches outside the strike zone, swinging at better pitches and making harder contact when he does. So really encouraging trend for him. And Drew, we also had a huge surprise at the catcher position this year.
I mean, catcher's the shallowest position in fantasy, and it will probably remain that way. I guess you can make an argument for closer, but generally, as far as position players go, catcher, it's hard to find a really good one. And Mitch Garver of the Twins basically went undrafted this spring, became the 5th most valuable fantasy catcher, 31 home runs in just 93 games played.
It wasn't even the first Twins catcher to be drafted.
Yeah.
Right, Jason Castro or Williams Astudillo. Castro's going to be a free agent. Astudillo, I think the hype has tamped down on him a lot. Garver was tops among all MLB hitters in home runs per at bat, above Mike Trout on that leaderboard. Aristides Aquino, who we could talk about, another rookie call-up that really shined. Joey Gallo, Nelson Cruz, Christian Yelich, all on that leaderboard. So Garver should be something close to the everyday catcher next year in Minnesota. And if you project him to play 120 to 130 games, what's the upside? I think if you're ranking catchers for 2020, you probably start with Gary Sanchez, JT Realmuto, Wilson Contreras, Yasmani Grandal, depending on where he goes in free agency. But then I think it's Garver. Will Smith maybe has an argument there, but those guys 5 or 6.
We're here to talk about hitters who underperformed in fantasy leagues this season. I think there's no better place to start than the first round, where Jose Ramirez was drafted. Has been there for a couple of years now, but really rough first half for him.
Yeah, consensus number 3 overall pick this year behind Mike Trout and Mookie Betts. Huge disappointment overall, due in large part to a horrendous first half. I think the low point was probably mid-June. He had a 198 batting average, 586 OPS, 4 home runs and 16 stolen bases through his first 66 games. That was on June 12th. I think that was around the time that Ryan called him Billy Hamilton, giving you some speed but really hurting your fantasy team in every other scoring category. He did rebound in the second half, though. Between July 4th and August 24th, put up a 1077 OPS, 325 batting average, 15 home runs, 44 RBIs in 44 games. But that was before he fractured the hamate bone in his wrist. But he hit a grand slam and a 3-run homer on his first game back from that injury on September 24th. And then didn't play the final weekend because of some renewed soreness in that wrist hand area. But I think he's going to fall in drafts next spring. But I was encouraged by what we saw in the second half before he got hurt, and then when he came back, at least that first game. He just turned 27 years old. He's in his physical prime. You can probably get him in the 3rd, 4th round, and I think he still has that first-round upside. I mean, he still finished with 23 home runs and 24 stolen bases.
Yeah, I mean, I think he certainly redeemed himself down the stretch, but probably dug a big hole for fantasy owners who are expecting first-round production. So I'm going to go with the Red Sox and Andrew Benintendi. This is someone who had an ADP in Yahoo leagues of 31.2. So that basically means like a fringy top 12 outfielder is what you were expecting, but he finished the year as the number 48th ranked fantasy outfielder, and that was behind the likes of Alex Gordon and Cole Calhoun, who were either late-round picks or waiver wire material in most mixed leagues. Benintendi hit just 13 home runs in 615 plate appearances, so he was up there a ton, hit just 266. And this is after he hit 282 through his first 333 major league games. He saw the strikeout rate go up, went up from 16% to 22.8%, was much more aggressive at the plate, and was sort of one of those guys who try to increase their launch angle, hit more home runs, but a lot of those fly balls turn into infield fly balls. So you see the strikeout rate go up with the infield fly ball rate. Makes sense that the batting average goes down as well. And he's also below league average in hitting metrics, average exit velocity, hard hit percentage. I do think he's still going to be a pretty trendy pick next year as a rebound candidate. You look at the lineup, I know there could be some changes with the Red Sox next year, but the lineup in this situation is certainly favorable, so he'll be a nice bounce-back pick, but I think expectations need to be tempered for him for now.
That lack of home runs in this era is
really hurts.
Really shocking.
Yeah.
It makes him very unvaluable in fantasy.
Yeah.
He's had a weird career. He's the guy that you just want to pop. You see everything you like about him, and in that lineup, if they don't break it up there in Boston.
And he hoped for a few steals, too, and they just didn't materialize either.
He looked like a 5-category guy when he came up in the minors.
He looked banged up towards the end.
He was.
He was banged up,
Yeah. So, Matthew, another player we had high expectations for this year, Reese Hoskins, and he's sort of disappointed as well.
He did fine for 4 months. He was the opposite of Ramirez. He did fine for 4 months and then just lost it in August, September. You really hope it was because he was banged up, because otherwise you wouldn't think he just lost it completely. But even when he was going good, he wasn't like big exit velocity. His home run distance was always around the very light for a big power hitter. And that's not really, doesn't look like a superstar. That's not a
Right.
40 home run guy. You thought he was going to be on that path.
Yeah, you would think in this environment he was
Yeah.
the type of had the type
He's
of
one of the guys who'd
profile.
go
that
for
would-
50.
He hits a ton of fly balls. Yeah,
and
certainly.
even more this year.
Yeah.
But you look at him, okay, so maybe this is what he is. Maybe he's a 30 homer,
Yeah.
230, 240 average.
That doesn't
and
stand out much in this environment.
Absolutely not.
His home run spray chart's very pull heavy, and a lot of great power hitters are pull hitters, but the elite ones tend to spray it around a little bit more. And also, I think his value was built into the idea that the top of the Phillies lineup was just going to be super potent. And JT Realmuto kind of disappointed. Gene Segura kind of disappointed.
McCutcheon out all year.
Yeah, McCutcheon out all. That's a huge table setter that they lost.
Yeah, so Hoskins doesn't hit for average, doesn't run,
No.
doesn't stand out for power in this current environment. I think he could even be overvalued going into next
Probably.
year, perhaps. So Ryan, probably someone we were most excited about here at Rotoworld this season was Daniel Murphy getting a chance to play in Coors Field, but
shaking his head.
but that
mean-
didn't work out.
I think all of us thought he was just a perfect fit for Coors Field.
Yeah.
All that room, he's just going to spray line drives everywhere. Top 5-ish second baseman ranked coming into the season. He finished outside the top 15 at the position. 28.1% hard hit rate was his lowest in the StatCast era. Just a 2.4% barrel rate was the bottom 6% in all of baseball. Fly ball rate was his lowest in 4 years. He only hit 3 home runs at Coors Field.
Wow.
Like if you said before the season, Murphy's going to hit 10 home runs on the road, which is what happened, you'd think, oh great, he's going to hit 16 or 17 at home and is going to have a great year. But he hit 3 home runs at Coors Field.
That's
Just
shocking.
crazy.
He couldn't move, man. Like they put him at first base and he still didn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who I think his price could fall to a certain point next spring. I might get interested again, but
Yeah.
at the same time, he's losing second base eligibility.
Yeah.
Going to turn 35 in April, and it's possible he's just not that good anymore.
Yeah. I mean, he looks like the kind of player who should be on an American League team
Most definitely.
next year. I think he could really benefit from
As like
that.
a part-time DH,
Yeah.
maybe.
I'm calling it the Rays. He's going to sign with the Rays. We're here to talk about pitchers we missed on in fantasy leagues this year as we wrap up the 2019 MLB season. And this year had no shortage of pitchers who really made a huge rise on the board. And the first one, I think, is someone who wasn't really drafted in any league, and that's Lukas G Alito. Really struggled last year, but made huge progress this year.
Yeah, I don't think we really missed on him because we didn't take any swings at him. at
Yeah,
all.
exactly.
At 6.13 ERA last season, low strikeout rate, high walk rate, really wasn't showing any signs of progress in 2018. Flash forward to 2019, 3.41 ERA, 228 strikeouts to just 57 walks, 176 innings. Overhauled his mechanics last offseason. There was also talk about him working on his mental approach to the game.
Right.
And as far as his pitch mix goes, ditched the sinker for the four-seamer, which a lot of pitchers are doing these days. Threw way more changeups
Yeah.
and really solved his issues versus left-handed batters, which he had problems with in the past. You know, the pedigree is obviously there. He's a former top overall pitching prospect, only 25 years old. You know, maybe the White Sox are better in 2020.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we were all kind of thinking they might take a little bit bigger step in 2019. They didn't quite do that. Got a little bit better, but could be on a better team. I'm completely buying into what G Alito did.
Yeah, added some velocity as well.
Yep.
And doubled the strikeout rate. I mean, how often do you see that from
Right.
a pitcher?
I think the pitcher G Alito made the biggest step from ADP, which is pretty much not available.
Yeah.
But Shane Bieber, I think, we knew he was a control specialist type guy in the minors. We knew he was locked into an Indians rotation spot, but you'd project him to maybe be like a 4th or 5th starter on a fantasy team, and like a good one, but unspectacular. You're thinking a decent ERA, good whip with the control, but he turned out to be the 5th most valuable fantasy starter, only behind Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole, Zach Greinke, and Steven Strasburg. 3.28 ERA, 1.05 whip, 259 strikeouts to just 40 walks and 214 innings. A team high 15 wins on a Indians club that just missed out on the American League wildcard game. The strikeouts were the biggest surprise. If he could just do what he did in 2019, he can be a top 10 fantasy starter in 2020, no doubt. Corey Kluber and Carlos Carrasco and Mike Clevenger were the hot names in the Cleveland rotation. They all went very high in drafts.
Yeah, he might go higher than all of them this year.
Yeah.
Bieber was a guy I liked, but I thought, given his repertoire, You thought like he's going to have some blow-up starts on nights that he didn't have pinpoint command, but he really didn't have those. He just took off.
He used that command to his advantage. He pitched outside the zone a bit more, which is what you want to see a guy like Miles Michaelis probably do more. Yeah.
Well, he pulled a Kluber because Kluber was kind of the same boat like 7-8 years ago now. You think he's going to come, he's going to be okay, he's going to be okay, be good, but he's got the average fastball, so he can't be that good. And then,
he
he's
went
one of the best around.
He went 149th overall, which, he was drafted, but that's
Middle
Rick
round
Porcello,
area, yeah.
Nick Pavetta, Kyle Freeland, dart throwing.
Nick Pavetta, why'd you have to do that?
Let's leave him alone.
So
all right?
another guy who was drafted in the middle rounds was Hyunjin Ryu with the Dodgers. He had an ADP of 179.3. So sort of in that same range. It's hard to say we missed on him. I think it was just a matter of him staying healthy, and I don't think anybody would have necessarily predicted that, given his history. But finishes the year as the MLB leader in ERA, 2.32. I don't think his skills could really be questioned, obviously, and it's understandable if you weren't willing to invest higher than that ADP, which certainly sounded reasonable. Finished the year at 182 and 2/3 innings, his highest total since he threw 192 innings in his first season in the majors in 2013. So he hasn't had this kind of workload in a long time, and it makes sense why he wore down the stretch, had a 5.40 ERA over his last 7 starts, at least finished strong in his season finale against the Giants. He's likely out of front-runner Cy Young Award status, but still has probably won some leagues for people.
And what you do is you pick both Rich Hill and Ryu and hope for 220 innings between. And that's
I'm
what you got.
going to be interested to
It's
see.
a great idea.
I'm going to be interested to see if he winds up re-signing with the Dodgers, because I think the way they manage all of their pitchers is really beneficial to Ryu, a guy who needs his rest to stay healthy.
Right. So we had a couple young pitchers emerge with the Cardinals this year, but Dakota Hudson has been a real staple.
Yeah. I don't think I missed on Dakota Hudson. I think I missed on just how good DeYoung and Wong were in the middle infield, because the defense behind him was awesome. And his strikeout rate, it's good for a sinker baller. It's what you were hoping for. His home run rate, good. His walk rate, not so great. It all ended up to a FIP that was almost 5.0, but the ERA was much better, 3.5. And you think that's a guy who can keep doing it, really, as long as he has those gloves behind him.
Yeah, I mean, the team is well suited to his style.
Yeah, I think people will pick him to regress because of that, looking at that FIP and not take into account that he's a guy that could outperform that because the defense is so good behind him.
And he throws harder than your average sinker baller. He can hit 97, 98.
Had 10 strikeouts, I think, season high in his last start of the season.
There might be some strikeout upside to tap into there. And pitches in a pitcher-friendly ballpark. The Cardinals were the best team defensively in the majors this year. And all those guys should be back unless they really mix it up.
Pitchers who underperformed during the 2019 season, as we do our season wrap-up here. So I think at the top of the board with closers, coming out of 2018, we had 2 historic performances, Blake Trinan, Edwin Diaz. Didn't work out so well this year, obviously, if you drafted them high.
The top 2 closers on average in the average draft, they were both excellent, like you said, in 2018. Focusing on Trinan, he went from a 0.78 ERA and 100 strikeouts in 80 innings with the A's to a 4.91 ERA with 59 strikeouts and 58 innings this year. Saves total last year, 38. This year, 16. Liam Hendriks became the 9th inning guy in Oakland there by mid-June. Trinan, meanwhile, was shut down early with a stress reaction in his back. Also missed some time with a shoulder strain, had an elbow issue, a lot of physical struggles, diminished velocity, and just wasn't nearly as effective with his slider. His cutter, which was kind of a new pitch for him, wasn't very effective. And now, just looking ahead, it looks like the A's might non-tender him. Yep. He's due for a final round of salary arbitration, made $6.4 million this year, so that's probably going to go up to $8 million. Even if you have a bad season, you usually get a raise through arbitration. And then, so, I don't know, he'll probably sign somewhere on like a 1-year deal, prove-it type contract, maybe with an option tacked on. I don't think he's going to be a closer anywhere. So he goes from being the top or 1 and 2 fantasy closer on the board to, I don't know, maybe not being on the board at all.
I could see him signing with like a rebuilding team, like the Royals or something like that, and getting some nice
start out
value.
middle relief and then maybe work his way to the back end.
Right. So we have our top closers up here for the season, and I think a lot of those guys, or certainly a few of them, were drafted pretty high. So I think if you managed to avoid the top of the board with Trinan and
right.
Diaz, you did okay.
If you didn't reach for a closer, you did fine.
Yeah. So with Diaz, of course, had 57 saves in 2018, 1.96 ERA, 124 strikeouts, just brilliant across the board. The Mariners decided to sell high as part of their rebuild. Traded him to the Mets, of course, Cano, and Cano comes with Diaz. The Mets traded Jared Kelenic, their top prospect. I think Mets fans were willing to go with it, with the assumption that Diaz would be that lockdown guy. In the ninth inning, of course, that did not happen. 5.59 ERA this year, and what really hurt him was the home run ball. He gave up 15 of them in just over 70 innings this year, and that's after he gave up 5 all of last season, so triple with the home run ball. I think what's weird about him is that he still struck out a ton of hitters. He had the 5th highest strikeout percentage among relievers with at least 50 innings pitched. So, if they can figure...
Velocity was fine, too.
Velocity was fine. I think it was mostly about command, the slider.
When he struggled in the second year with the Mariners, it was all about control. It's the
Right.
walks.
Right.
You weren't, and you thought that could happen possibly, but you weren't expecting the home run barrage.
Yeah, and it's, the ball in the strike zone, too. I mean, just leaving pitches out over the plate. So, 377 batting average on balls in play this year, too. So I think there's a combination of the command and bad luck.
He still looks nasty when you watch him.
Yeah.
He still got that stuff.
And there's been some talk about a physical issue with the bone spur, so maybe we hear something after the season. Maybe he'll have a cleanup surgery, something like that. But I could see him being a nice value, assuming he begins next year in the closer role. Of course, Seth Lugo finished the year as the Mets closer, but I think that'll sort of be wide open going into next year. So moving over to starting pitchers, Chris Sale, an annual first-round pick, early first round, early as among fantasy starters anyway. But obviously he's had a crazy year, up and down year with the Red Sox. Started poorly, but finished fairly strong before the elbow issue.
Yeah, he just an awful April. He had velocity was way down. Alarms were being sounded. I know I didn't really have a ton of faith that he was going to bounce back, but lo and behold, he was just completely dominant in May and June. ERA the final 2 months shut up again. He did still have a dominant strikeout rate during that time, but then he was shut down with the elbow injury. Ultimately finished as the number 40 starting pitcher behind guys like John Means, Ryan Yarborough, and Marco Gonzalez. It's not exactly what you were expecting when you took Chris Sale. Having said that, 218 strikeouts in 147 innings. Only Garrett Cole, among pitchers with at least 140 innings, had a higher strikeout percentage than Chris Sale. So I think he's probably going to be elite next year if he's healthy, but it's a pretty big if at this point. When he was shut down, they said it was quote-unquote only elbow inflammation, but I don't think he's quite out of the woods just yet. He just didn't have surgery, had the PRP injection, so he's someone that we're going to be watching really closely in spring training to see how he looks.
Yeah, if that platelet-rich plasma treatment that PRP doesn't take, maybe it's surgery time at that point, which would really be a problem.
So it's impossible to project him for next year.
Yeah.
We'll have to follow closely over the winter, and then during spring training, if he is healthy, how he looks in the spring. So another starting pitcher who struggled this year, Noah Syndergaard. Sort of frustrating that he hasn't taken that step forward.
He was always underachieved, really, but his underachievement was still really, really good. So you wondered if he could stay healthy, could this be the year? And he stayed healthy, and it was not the year.
Yeah.
He complained about the slick ball early. He complained about his catcher late.
Right.
His defense was never.
Yeah,
I think that's
a
a bad
factor.
shortstop play, center field, not a lot of range there. And then Citi Field, which was like an all-time pitchers park in 2018, that was a great place for pitchers. And then this year, it was just back to average.
Well, they didn't have Pete Alonso hitting bombs there last year.
Yeah, so the landscape has changed.
Everything seemed to work against him this year. Some of that seemed to be like him making it work against him, but now you just wonder, is the upside still there? The strikeouts are down.
Yeah, it's odd to see the strikeouts down in this environment when they're just shooting up everywhere
else. Yeah,
So
I mean,
now
he
you
should
can't
be
really, even if you can pencil in for a full season next year, he doesn't look like a top 10 starter.
Yeah.
But I think if you do get him, maybe toward the 10 to 15 range, maybe 15, 20 even, there's enough upside that you could justify that pick, and he
At
could
that
be
price, yeah.
a nice value.
And he could be traded this offseason. We'll have to see where his new environment might
San
be.
Diego?
They've shopped him a couple of times, so anything's possible there. For around-the-clock MLB news, rumors, injury reports, and analysis, go to rotoworld.com/MLB.